I'm Dr. Anjali Bagra, Medical Director of Mayo Clinic's Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity.
And I'm Barbara Jordan, Administrator of Mayo Clinic's Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity. And we are proud to present the Rise for Equity podcast.
Welcome to the Mayo Clinic Rise for Equity podcast. I'm your host, Lee Hawkins. And in this episode, we're going to feature some of the rising stars at the Rise for Youth program, which is a first of its kind collaboration between Mayo Clinic and the Rochester branch of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And it's designed to help Black and underrepresented students transform themselves from youth with potential to competitive and empowered talent entering the workforce. I want to welcome Walé Elegbede, who's Director of Strategic Management Services at Mayo Clinic. He's also President of the Rochester NAACP, and he leads the program. And Walé, you have two special students you brought along today. I'm going to let you introduce them, the Rise Scholars.
Sure, yeah, we're so proud of them. So we have Safa and we have Faizza. Scholars from our Rise Up cohort, and just doing a lot of great things. So both of them go to the University of Minnesota, Rochester, and absolutely future leaders. So they inspire me, and I think they will the rest of you too.
Welcome to both of you. Before we get too far into this, I want to give a little bit more background on the program. The goal is to create new pathways for success by providing students with critical educational and leadership skills, training, and long-term mentoring for successful careers in healthcare, science, and beyond. Tell me more about the program, because it just started, right? This is the first year?
Absolutely.
Okay, how does the program work?
Yeah, well, so it's a 4-week program, right? And in terms of, first of all, why are we doing this? I think it's important to understand that. So when you look at Minnesota, it's one of the worst states when it comes to this. Basically, is the second worst state when it comes to racial equality, and this has a huge impact on employment and education disparities. And so we wanted to have a program that really targeted those systemic issues. When you think about social determinants of health, as you all are very familiar with, I mean, education plays a critical role. So the way that the program works, it's a 4-week program where we have the two cohorts, the Rise Up and then the Rise High. And the focus is really more on leadership development, application of leadership skills, the long-term mentoring, and also access. We don't talk about access a lot, but that's really key. If you're a parent, what do you do for your kids? You support them, you give them the education, you give them the mentoring, you also open up doors and access. And so that's one thing that we're also hoping will come out of this.
Okay, are you speaking about trying to get more doctors, or is it healthcare professionals in general?
So the beauty about this is we're not going to decide. They're going to decide what they want to do. So if you want to work in the healthcare field, that's perfectly fine. We're going to support them. But if you want to, for example, become a restaurant owner or a small business, we're going to support you along that journey. So this is not a pipeline to come work for Mayo Clinic. It's really, we want to support you because investing in the community, investing in our youth is so critical. So that was a really critical for me when we were starting this. And then again, strong support across the board, great partners with Dr. Bagra, Barbara Jordan, others. And so it was really critical to make sure that, look, this is not just a pipeline to get into to Mayo. It's really, look, from an NAACP perspective, we want to make sure that, you can get a good job and you can try whatever you decide to do.
Okay, excellent. And do you know what you are looking at possibly doing?
Yes, I want to become a surgeon. I'm in my 4th year of my undergrad and I have 1 semester left. So I'll be applying for medical school next year.
Okay.
And likewise, I'm in my 4th year in my last semester as well, and I want to become a physician assistant. I'm not sure what I want to specialize in, but that's where I'm headed.
Okay, so this is a program that's working in partnership with Mayo Clinic, so it would make sense that if you did have an interest in medicine, you're in the right place,
Absolutely.
right? It's important for me to introduce some of the data first before we get too deep into this. About 2.6% of the nation's doctors in 2019 and 7.3% of students enrolled in medical school in 2020 identified as Black or African American. And despite efforts to bolster the ranks of Black doctors, the figures still lag the 13% of the overall population. What does this mean for our country? The projected growth of racial minority populations will drive demand for 2/3 of new doctors over the next decade and a half. Nearly 45,000 new doctors will be needed to care for the Hispanic population, the nation's fastest growing population, and in 2019, only 3.8% of doctors identified as Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin. So this is across marginalized communities. So if you put some doctors into the pipeline, that's going to be really powerful. Because of the fact that there's such a shortfall right now. We're all excited for the prospects. Tell me about the 4-week curriculum.
Yeah, so it's really it's backed by a very robust curriculum development. So we designed this very intentional. There's also the RISE framework that we're using that was developed by Dr. Bagra. But basically the first week was really more about leadership. So we talked about servant leadership, and we brought in a lot of strong, knowledgeable, taught leaders. So we talked about servant leadership, emotional intelligence, developing respectful relationships, EQ. These are all power skills. So we're not teaching calculus or anything like that, but we're teaching about what is that, the DNA for strong leadership. Well, you need to be able to communicate. You need to be able to plan stuff. You need to have strategic focus. So all of those leadership stuff, that's what we sort of introduce, the first week. Second week is really about how do you apply that, right? And then there's also a career fair, and then the importance of giving back to community. Because again, we want this to live beyond all of us. At least that's my hope. And so, there are current leaders, and they're going to have to give back and really teach others, what you're learning. And that's how, as a society, we improve. So, Lee, I know you and I had briefly mentioned, for me, education is so important. I mean, when I look at, my background, originally from Nigeria, and growing up, it was really important just to see just the dichotomy of if you have education and if you don't. Those that had education, they had a better shot. It's obviously not always easy, but when you have a good education, you can actually achieve a lot. And so that's why we're trying to do this, to make sure that all of our youth, first of all, the talent is there. The talent is innate. What we're just doing is we're really just creating that right environment for our youth to thrive. So.
And I'm sure you probably have heard this at home many times about education and how critical that is. Tell me how you got interested, both of you, in the field of medicine.
I can go first. My dad is an ECMO specialist, and he works in the hospital. He really inspired me growing up because he was working so hard going to school while we were all in elementary school, and my mom was raising us by herself while he was coming. We lived in the cities, and he would go to Rochester and commute back and forth to be there for his family, but also get an education and specialize in what he wanted to do. The way he always explained it to me is, I help people breathe, because I didn't know what ECMO stood for when I was younger, but I thought that was so inspiring, and I knew I wanted to work in the medical field and work in healthcare and help people. And I've always been good at science, so it just fit.
Okay.
For me, I would say it started as a kid. My parents would always narrate their life story back home, saying that we never had an education, so it's important for you to pursue one. I would say my interest in medicine first started when I used to attend doctor appointments with my mom. She wasn't really good at speaking English, so I would accompany her to translate and be that gap, I guess, to bridge the language barrier. I would say that's what first interested me, but then as watching TV shows, it's kind of generic, but seeing doctors and stuff, it just seemed exciting. But I currently work as a patient care assistant, so I think that's what seeing it firsthand and experiencing what they actually do on a day-to-day basis. That's what inspired me.
Powerful. You talked about your parents and your family. What do you know about your lineage and some of the things that were overcome and that have led to the resilience that has created you?
Well, my parents immigrated from Somalia, so they came here and started a new life for themselves and wanted to raise their kids better and give them opportunities that they never had as children.
All right.
And I would say likewise, my parents were refugees, and my mom, because of like fleeing to America to flee persecution, my mom didn't get a chance to finish high school, and then also my dad as well. So there was always like reiterated that like education is important and that it's good to pursue one.
And when I'm sitting, so I'm sitting next to you, two dynamic individuals, and then I have the president of the Rochester NAACP right across from me. What is the agenda for the NAACP in participating and partnering on this program?
Yeah, we have a simple agenda. When you look at our vision is really, we want a society where there's no racial hatred or discrimination. Bold. And we get there through equity and social justice. We're very intentional about that. When you look at the history of our country, from civil rights, voting rights, reproductive rights, even in terms of just education, or even the integration of the military. The NAACP has been at that forefront. I mean, a lot of stuff that folks don't know. So for us, it's really, we want to use equity to really lift everybody up. I mean, these are human rights, and it's really important. So obviously, when we drill down a little bit further, you have all these social determinants of health. I mean, obviously, with COVID, we saw a lot of disparities. African-American brothers and sisters, our Native brothers and sisters. And so for us, it's really making sure that all of America's children are able to fully live up to their potential. And that means, making sure that there is no racial discrimination and hatred. And it's really also just having solid plans in place. So the Rise for Youth is an example of that, right? It's going to take more than Mayo Clinic to be able to address this. So this is more like a catalyst, right? We're hoping this becomes an example, a model for others. But it's not hard stuff. When I think about some of our societal issues, well, it has to be just more intention, right? And then you commit to it. Because what we're doing at Rise, I mean, it started because, after the murder of George Floyd, as organizations were reflecting, we had conversations, with trusted partners at Mayo, and they had made a commitment, $100 million commitment to end racism, and we were looking at, well, what can we do locally, and also start to go, and how we expand the program, and it just sort of fit. So from the NAACP, our agenda is really, we want to realize that vision, and it can definitely be done.
What was powerful is yesterday I was at an event with some of the top diversity and inclusion people from Mayo, Dr. Bagra and Barbara Jordan, and they said, we stand on the shoulders of giants. And of course, we've heard that, right? But that is literally the case, especially with a lot of the young people today, because of the fact that mentorship is so important, right? I mean, here you have someone who has dedicated his life to mentoring you. What is the power of mentorship, and in what ways has mentorship really led you to the journey that you're on now?
Well, we were set up with mentors like at the end of the program, and we haven't gotten to get in touch with them yet because we just finished the program. But all of the people that we met, all our guest speakers, all the community leaders, and everyone is just so dedicated to helping us succeed in life. And they all gave us like their contact information and everything. So I feel like everyone that we've met throughout this program is guiding me and is there for me to assist me in any way that I need in the future.
Tell me about the things that you liked most about the program.
The highlight of the program for me was learning about emotional intelligence. I couldn't believe that I'm almost done with my college education, and this is the first time I'm learning about it. It is just so powerful. Dr. Amy Sigmiller-Renner taught us about intent versus impact, and it's just a really important principle in communication for every relationship and every profession. So I can take this with me wherever I go.
I would say my biggest highlight is when I first started at a predominantly white institution, I noticed that I could count all the Black students on one hand. So in contrast to this program, seeing the diversity and people of color and having the same shared lived experiences as them, I feel seen and heard and like empowered to grow as an individual, just because there's that sense of belonging.
Well, let's face it. I grew up in Minnesota. Okay. And so let's face it. It's not the most diverse place. It's not. And we have to address the tension and the reason that the programs such as this exist. How has it been when you're Black in some of these predominantly white spaces with the intention of becoming a medical professional?
I would say that you often have to do twice as much to feel seen and heard. So that could be draining. So if there were more diversity and representation in certain environments, there's more space for sharing different perspectives and growth, and then feeling safe and comfortable in that environment. Most times when you're in a predominantly white space, you feel that you have to act a certain way to feel accepted. So seeing others who look like you and have the same experience as you make you feel more comfortable and allow you to grow in that space.
What kind of experiences have you had?
Similar to Faizza, because we go to the same university, but this program has really helped me speak up, especially for myself. When I was in elementary school and middle school, I didn't have a lot of people who looked like me. Like, I didn't have a lot of friends that were Black. I didn't have a lot of Muslim friends, just because of where I lived and the schools that I went to. And now I feel like I can truly be myself and thrive in these environments.
Yeah, Lee, I'll just add that, look, the importance of representation is so important. It's so key. And we hear that, I mean, from students. I mean, even in Rochester, I mean, I think they have about 40% students of color. But when you look at the instructors, very, very low rates. And what the students are telling us is that this matters, equity matters, inclusion matters, but diversity also matters. So, I mean, that's how Faizza mentioned, it created her safety, right? Yeah. So it's so important for us to do that.
Did you say Rochester has what percentage people of color?
Yeah, in terms of the schools.
What was it?
It's about 40.
Oh, wow, that's pretty high.
Yeah, no, it's pretty high, in terms of our school. But when you look at the teachers, not so much, right? So again, I say this to stress that we have opportunities for equity, inclusion, and diversity, and just an intentional effort to really address those.
Coming from an organization that, let's face it, is maybe in crisis to a certain extent in terms of youth engagement, because there was a time in the 1950s and 60s when the NAACP was maybe even led by youth, right? And so you're in a period as a civil rights organization wanting to be relevant and wanting to make sure that the next generation of young people are aware of the NAACP and wanting to be involved and engaged in civil rights activities. What has this done in terms of exposing you to the NAACP? Do you think you'll be working with them in the future in any capacity?
For sure. I don't think I'm gonna just quit after this program, because it's very inspiring, and I want to pay back to the future generations like what I've had given to me.
And how important is advocacy and activism to you?
It's very important.
Okay.
Very important.
I would say, to add on to that, it's very important because some people don't have a voice. So for us to be honored with the opportunity to learn from the Rise for Youth program and the NAACP, I feel like it's important to give back to the community and then continue that cycle.
What is the goal long term? What would you like to see happen?
Yeah, long term, I want none of our children to be left behind. I don't want no wasted talent. We have so much unrealized potential, and so really, these young leaders contributed strongly to society, leading and helping others. That's how we lift everybody up. So that's what I want to see. It's so important to me, Lee. And when I talk about, what's really deeply important to me, I think ethical leaders, you have a responsibility to make sure that they create a positive environment. My mom used to talk about, the Yoruba adage, "Eniyan kan ló bímọ, gbogbo ayé ló ń tọ́mọ." And essentially what that means is, yes, a single woman gives birth to a child, but the whole community has an important role in playing to take care of all children. It takes a village. Nobody does it alone. We stand on the shoulders of giants. Whatever little that we can do from Mayo and the NAACP to impact them, and then they in turn give it to others. That's how we get our society better. It's a simple formula. All it takes is passion, dedication, and the commitment, and we can make it happen.
What are the actionable things that people who are listening to this podcast can do right away, as soon as this podcast is over, if they want to affect change on a equity, diversity, and inclusion level?
Well, right away they can get engaged with the NAACP Rochester branch. So they can go to our website, and then they can learn more about the Rise for Youth program, because we need a lot of mentors. So that's number one. The other thing is just within your local community and in their respective organizations and department, just commit to it. And put in the time to really listen. Sometimes it's important to listen to underserved communities, and when you actually do listen, you find out what the concerns are, but you have to create that safe space. That's what Faizza was talking about. Hey, I felt safe here. I hear that a lot within the organization too. If you can't create safety, you don't know what the issues are. Don't know what the issues are, you're missing the boat.
What is the commitment? What does the commitment involve in terms of becoming a mentor for a program like this?
We have two types of mentors. We have primary mentors, which is more long-term, so that can be a year to a lifelong. It's going to be based off of the mentor and the mentee. But you also have, flash mentors. So maybe, Lee, you're a busy man, you only have 30 minutes to give or an hour to give, a month. I think you could do more, but let's say let's say that's what you have. Well, there's a role for that, because then we can actually help our students, with maybe some tactical stuff, maybe on okay, this is how you speak and communicate, or maybe this is how you manage your project plan, or whatever, right? So if it's the long-term mentorship or the short-term, there's a role for everyone to play in this.
And I think it's important because a lot of times people want to get engaged and involved, but they don't know even where to start.
Yep.
And how big of a commitment it is. And that's why I asked. So what's next? You're graduating from the University of Minnesota, Rochester. What's your next step after that?
Taking the MCAT and applying for medical school.
I would say for me, it's applying as well for PA schools and then getting in. Through this program and then my experiences of just college in general, I have a passion now to work in underserved communities and give back.
Okay, so that's really, you've already decided that, and it's funny because at the RISE conference, there's already been a lot of talk about underserved communities and the different places where there need to be improvement in terms of racial representation in research, in terms of recruitment and retention of qualified and talented medical professionals. And so this is a huge area and you're ready for it.
Yeah, they are.
As you look forward and you continue to do this, do you expect that this program could be expanded beyond Rochester?
Yeah, that's the intention. How we do that. We're in a crawl, walk, run phase. So obviously the first phase was really important for us to pilot and is really successful. And so we're looking at how best do we scale this. So yes, that is something that we're definitely looking into.
Okay, great. Well, I look forward to hearing and reading a lot about you, young ladies. I know you're going to be successful, and please, please, please continue the great work and to give back to the program as you've committed to.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
And this has been the Mayo Clinic's Rise for Equity podcast. My name is Lee Hawkins. We'll see you next time.